our guest. Let's add a little, hopefully, some common sense thinking to the energy situation this morning. Craig Shields is our guest. Anytime I tell you what, I wanted to have Craig on. I knew he had a physics degree. When I found out he also had a philosophy degree in addition to a physics degree, Craig, that was the clincher. To have those two. I mean, a philosophizing physics guy. That you're a perfect person to talk to about energy. I would think you got to have a little philosophical element to it all, don't you?
Well, I suppose so, and thanks so much for having me on.
Well, and you're located today where?
Near Santa Barbara, California.
Santa Barbara, California. So we've gotten you up really early this morning, and we do
just coming up.
We do appreciate that here in Kentucky. We're getting so much rain, we can't fall off into the ocean. But I tell you, we really have been deluged with rain this year. It seems like for a while maybe we're kind of centered on our own problems here weather-wise, but it's been a while since we've heard much about wildfires in California or torrential rains and mudslides and things like that. Is that true, or have I just missed it?
Well, I think we haven't had anything in the last few months. Let's put it that way. And I know that you've had terrible rains. We obviously have our we have no concerns about tornado warnings and so forth. Though we, of course, you never know when the next earthquake's going to hit. So I think pretty much every region, at least of the United States, has its things about which to be concerned.
Yeah, Craig, you graduated from Trinity College in Hartford, Connecticut, and you also have a degree from Georgetown University in Washington. Are you an East Coast guy by nature and who moved west, or?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. I grew up in Philadelphia.
Grew up in Philly, and
yep. By the way, my wife bred horses for 20 years or so, and I used to come back to Lexington all the time to go to Keeneland, and those were some good days.
Yeah. Growing up in Philly had to be pretty interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a wonderful place. I still root for the Eagles and the 76ers and so
forth. and they need a lot of rooting for. But the Phillies, you have the Phillies now. They're going to do well without any question. It looks like this maybe another year for them. What took you to the West Coast? Just a gravitation because of business?
Well, actually, right after graduate school, I came out here. I knew some people, and I was kind of purposeless in my life at that time, and it was no big deal to move out and establish new roots. That was 1980. That was over 30 years ago. So I feel something like a native, I guess.
Yeah. Let's talk about getting a physics degree at Trinity College there in Hartford, Connecticut, back in the late 1970s. Was energy a big part of getting that degree? Did you already during those college days? Did you have a real interest in what was going on in the energy world?
Oh no, this came very recently. In fact, yeah, my life. I suppose you could just sum up. Not that listeners are particularly interested in Craig Shields' biography, but I'll tell you what. It's a very simple one, and that is, as I mentioned, I went to college to study the things that I loved. In other words, this is an opportunity, and I urge all young people and their families to take advantage of this. This is an opportunity to, for a few years, just study the good stuff. In other words, whatever interests you, ask yourself the questions that people have been asking themselves for thousands of years. Read the great books, learn to write and so forth. And then from there, it was a business. I was a business consultant, a marketing consultant to the Fortune-sized tech companies, the IBMs and Hewlett-Packards and so forth, for 30 years. And then my third career, I suppose you could say, was simply when I realized I needed something else to do with my life. This seemed to be a really good idea, this whole thing of renewable energy and exploring the business implications of it. In other words, we all know that we're going to get there. We all know that what we're doing now is horribly unsustainable. Some of us are more aware of that than others, but I think over a fairly short period of time, the average American is going to realize that this regardless of what we're being told by the oil companies, this is not going to wash long term. So we are going to make a change. We're not going to be driving Hummers 100 years from now. So the question then becomes, well, exactly what does this metamorphosis look like? In other words, where are we going? How quickly? And probably most importantly, who's going to make a buck in the process? So a lot of the people who bought my book, I think, or who come to my website, and I guess you'll be mentioning that, but a lot of these people say, it's true that we're going in this direction. This is going to become a multi-trillion-dollar industry. How can I be part of this? How can I be part of the team that profits, that really makes this happen and is rewarded accordingly?
The name of Craig's book is Renewable Energy, Facts and Fantasies. Craig, I'm always looking for ways to kind of not really be vanilla, not straddle the fence, but hopefully to find a little common sense, because I'm always have this idea that when we get on topics like global warming, that somebody comes along and says, we're warming up and we're going to have New York City underwater and those things in a few years, and if you take that extreme, then you don't make much progress. If you take the other extreme, there's no problem. Things aren't changing at all. But if we can add a little common sense and everybody say, hey, if you want to, is our environment changing? Well, I don't think there can be any question. I mean, are all the emissions that we're putting into the air, is it having some effect? Absolutely. Don't be alarmed, Craig. This is just the National Weather Service, our emergency testing will break in, and this will last about a minute, then we'll be right back. They're just going to tell us because we're under a tornado warning right now. So just stand by. Oh, okay. And so there's your weather update. Very important. We are under a tornado warning for a part of our listening area right now. So please be very alert and take precautions. Right now, here in downtown Mount Sterling, we're getting again just a lot of wind is the element right now. Not any rain yet or hail or anything like that. But again, we will continue to update you. And we're back now to Craig Shields, who's out in beautiful sunny California. Sun coming up this morning. We're talking about Craig's book, Renewable Energy, Facts and Fantasies. We'll direct you to his website, the number 2, greenenergy.com is the website you can go to. And Craig is a physics graduate who also has a philosophy degree from Trinity College in Hartford, Connecticut. And he is very interested in where we are headed with energy policy and what's going on there. And so we're back now, and I think I was just raising the question about, the extremists on either side don't really seem to get much accomplished. We've got to have some common sense, don't we, Craig, in trying to deal with this energy situation?
Well, in my estimation, you're exactly right. And I think you were asking about global warming in particular. And this is, for whatever reason, this is a topic that stirs the ire of so many people. The way I look at this, and yes, the chapter on global warming in my book, I think it's the third one. By the way, the book is a compilation of interviews with subject matter experts. So I went to 25 people whom I chose carefully, associated with various technologies, various imperatives to move to clean energy, political issues, economic issues, as well as the technological issues. And the guy I interviewed on global warming happens to be the person who is largely credited with having discovered it in the first place. In 1972, he correctly predicted that there'd be a measurable increase in the temperature of the Earth's atmosphere by 1980. And he's got, terabytes of information and stacks of reports, and he directs graduate students in experiments all over the world. And it was a fascinating way of spending a couple hours, I can tell you that. But the point is that I know there are people who don't believe in global warming. Actually, a couple of years ago, you couldn't find very many of them. Now, the public, especially on the Republican side, if you're a college-educated Democrat, you're about 85% likely to believe in global warming. If you're a college-educated Republican, you're about 20% likely to believe in it. So whatever. I hate to be so cavalier, but the way I deal with this is I know there are people who don't believe in global warming, and that's completely fine. I happen to believe in it simply, but only because I happen to have interviewed people, climate scientists, who have convinced me that. I'm no better than the opinions that I've gotten, or the science that I've gotten from the people I've interviewed. So fine, there are people who don't believe in global warming. Are there people who don't believe in lung cancer or terrorism? I haven't met any of them. So my point is that there are plenty. There are 6 or 8 wonderful reasons to migrate away from fossil fuels and nuclear in the direction of renewable energy. And if you don't believe in global climate change, fine, just pick another one.
There you go. And as we look at progress being made, we just within the last week had Senator Rand Paul on, who is a new senator from the state of Kentucky, and he was really critical of the current administration in terms of feeling like they're not really doing much in the positive way of trying to head us, in the direction of solving some of these energy-related problems. How do you feel after you've talked to all these experts and look at where we're heading? Are we making enough progress? Is the policy, do you sense, going to lead us anywhere, or are we going to still have to have somebody within the political reins in Washington come to the forefront and lead us into directing energy policy that might prove much more viable and get the job done, so to speak?
Well, I think it's the latter. In other words, we desperately need leadership at the federal government level, but I'm not holding my breath. Unfortunately, we live in a democracy whose key points are that our elected officials' jobs come up for renewal every 2 years. And so if we're expecting those leaders to make decisions on our behalf whose benefits aren't going to be experienced in that election cycle, we're kidding ourselves. And that's essentially what we have. I was at a conference yesterday where we were talking about the fact that the Earth receives 6,000 times more energy every day from the sun than all 7 billion of us consume, and how technologically we're at the point where we can fairly cost effectively, and more so every day, we can harvest that. We have not only the mature technologies like photovoltaics and wind, but we have half a dozen other technologies coming along right behind them, one darling of which may be solar thermal or concentrated solar power, the costs of which are coming down, and as I say, every day. Now, but there are issues associated with it, obviously, one of which is that you have a lot of sun in the deserts of the Southwest. So if you were to construct, and nobody's suggesting that you would, but just for the listening audience to kind of wrap their wits around this thing, if you were to build a solar thermal farm in the shape of a square that was 92 miles on a side in the middle of the southwestern desert, you'd have more than enough power for the entire continent of North America. And you could do a similar thing in North Africa and for the entire continent of Europe. So this is technology that's being developed. It's deployed in a great number of places all over the world. But as I say, it's not a mature technology. It's something that probably lags 25, 30 years behind PV and wind. But here you have a technology that is eminently deployable. In other words, this is something that we could do. You do, however, have issues, one of which is power transmission. So you've got how many people live, how many megawatts are used in the southwestern deserts. Well, not a heck of a lot. So you need power transmission. We do need to upgrade our grid, whether we like it or not, and transmitting that power to the population centers that are largely on the coasts. So now that comes into an issue of eminent domain. So in other words, somebody's going to have to say, well, we need to do for power transmission exactly what we did for automobile transmission. In other words, the national highway system or the natural gas pipelines or whatever. We've got ways of moving stuff around this country. We just happen not to have a way of getting large amounts of electricity moved around. So we have to do that. And somebody said, well, I guess we're going to have to, the federal government's going to have to help here. Oh, no kidding. Yes, the federal government is going to have to help here. And it is, you're right. I'm sure I didn't listen to the interview with Rand Paul, but I'm sure I would have agreed that it's a disgrace that we can't get our elected leaders to help us with respect to this transition. This is one of the most important things that we'll be doing in the United States over the next century, and the fact that we have partisan bickering in Washington and essentially nothing else but is a disgrace.
The book, again, we have another half hour to go, but sometimes beginning at the end a little bit is not so bad. When you got to the end of this book, Renewable Energy Facts and Fantasies, what did you kind of come up with? What in your mind, the whole shebang, the entire package that you had put together, did it leave you hopeful that we would solve the problems? Did it leave you discouraged that we're just going to continue to flounder in the situation we're in? Can you describe that for us?
Well, it's interesting you ask. The book on which I'm working right now tries to explore what are the practicalities, being a pragmatist on this thing and looking at the technologic, the economic, and the political issues. What really are the barriers associated with this? And just to take an example, the subsidies that are bestowed on fossil fuels, oil in particular, run about 5 or 6 times the subsidies that are given to renewable energy. So I would submit that until we have a material change in that, in other words, I'm sure in the 1930s the federal government needed to subsidize oil to start the flow, as it were, and to make this happen in terms of transportation in our country 80 years ago. I'm equally sure that it's completely unnecessary now, and that it's tantamount to just a transfer of wealth from the taxpayer to the wealthiest organizations, the shareholders of the most profitable organizations on the planet. So, this is exactly what I mean, and I hate to sound so cynical, so pessimistic about where we're going on this thing. But until the fact that we're still handing the oil companies $70 billion a year, and depending on the way you count it, that's an extremely conservative way of accounting for this. But the fact that we're still rubber stamping in Bureau of Land Management land leases for the oil companies that provide access to that land at extremely beneficial rates, until we get beyond this, until we get the common American wakes up one day and says, I've had it with this thing. I'm not voting for anybody else who doesn't understand this, who isn't going to get behind fairness and decency and the way that translates into a sensible energy policy. So I'm sorry to have gone off on you on that. But so I suppose, am I optimistic? I don't know. I think that I am optimistic to the degree that I do believe Americans are interested in this subject now for the first time. We're learning more about it every day. We understand that it's a complex issue. So the concept of the book, and thanks, by the way, for mentioning it, is that we live in a world of tough realities. This is that everybody, well, not literally everybody, but most people believe that this is an important transition, that we need to move to electric transportation, that Lord knows we need to move to clean energy. When you think about all the other aspects of sustainability, of energy efficiency, of the way we grow our food, etc., these are not just things that are nice to have, and these are not for ideas for left-leaning tree huggers. These are ideas that lie at the very root of survival for us and our country. Not to mention that I consider myself a citizen of the world. So there's 7 billion people on this planet whose survival is very much linked to doing the right thing with respect to this. But my point is that there are tough realities. There are economic issues. There are political issues. And there are ever-evolving technologic issues. And until we can have an informed, relevant discussion on some of those things, that's the degree to which we're floundering. In other words, we have elected officials who think we're not watching, who think we don't understand that. And to the degree to which they're right, we are in trouble.
Hey, coming up next half hour, Craig Shields is going to tell us how quickly we will see $2 per gallon gasoline again. No, that's not coming. But we do have a lot of more information to share with you through our guest this morning, Craig Shields. The book, Renewable Energy, Facts and Fantasies, is something that you just want to seriously consider to go well beyond where we'll be able to get to in this hour. You can also go online at 2, greenenergy.com. As well, and get information there. We will be back. We're going to take a short break. A little news from the Kentucky News Network. We'll get updated on what's happening around the Commonwealth this morning. Again, our weather situation, still we're without rain in downtown Mount Sterling, just a lot of wind at this point in time, and we are under, at least we're under a tornado watch this morning here in the Gateway area. We'll be back in just a couple of minutes as we'll rejoin Craig Shields, our guest on Mid-Mornings on Main Street. Philadelphia wasn't so bad, was it, Craig Shields, when you were growing up?
Not at all.
There's Bruce Springsteen and the streets of Philadelphia. When you were coming along, were you ever aware of a band called Wax? Craig?
No, I'm sorry.
Okay, no problem.
What year?
They were a Philadelphia band that would have been back around 1970.
Wow, I was there. Wax, you say?
Wax,
nope,
just a band.
Sorry.
They were just a local Philadelphia a guy named Rick Levy was the guitarist and singer for them, along with David Kagan, and they have an interesting story, and I just thought I'd mention it because thought you might have heard of that band. Craig Shields, our guest, and the book is Renewable Energy, Facts and Fantasies. We're talking about really our kind of a failed energy policy. I think everybody would agree that we just haven't done a good job in the way we have moved through the last half century, really, in planning for the future and dealing with the present in terms of the energy situation in this country. And you don't plan, and you look up, and you've got gasoline prices that are in the $4 range now, and that does concern everybody. And we all wake up, and we will be concerned. The question is, will we get? You almost hope, Craig, and it's painful to say that gasoline prices stay kind of high for about a year. Maybe that would be. It takes more than just a few months, really, because if it trickles back down even to the $3 range, then people just kind of go back and say, okay, well, things aren't so bad, and we forget about our problems.
It's true. It's very true.
Happens all the time. In terms of the administration's position now and oil. We're in a coal state, Craig, here in Kentucky. The use of coal, and I think most of us would say, yeah, along with less dependency on oil, we need to move away from the use of coal, another fossil fuel, and how best to do that. And one of the ways, of course, the energy companies here have there have been a lot of improvements made. We don't put power plants in place anymore that use coal without there being some fairly sophisticated mechanisms in place to try to diminish what we're spilling into the atmosphere. But how about that? Did you deal with that in the book, and is there any thought that all of that technology really works and makes coal a much better resource than it was a half century ago?
Well, there's no doubt that it's a better resource than it was a half century ago. But I go back to what I was saying about Hummers. In other words, I don't think anybody thinks that if you look into the future 50 years that we're going to be driving gas guzzlers. And I really don't think that we believe that we're going to be mining coal and burning it. And I'm not saying that there isn't validity to carbon capture and sequestration, or that any of the other things, or that we can snap our fingers and move away from it next week. So this is going to be an evolution, but it's an important evolution. There are half a dozen flavors of renewables in terms of hydrokinetics and geothermal and wind and photovoltaics and solar thermal and so forth, and a great number of different sub-flavors of biomass. That all of which have a great deal of merit and will be proving themselves out over the coming half a century or so. So I sympathize with the people whose life work is mining coal and otherwise processing coal. But it's like so many other things that are supplanted quickly or slowly by technology, the cost of which is continuing to come down and the efficacy of which is continuing to rise. So, in other words, I'm glad I'm not making adding machines or typewriters, or, I mean, you can't name all the things that just simply don't exist anymore because of technology. And unfortunately, for the people whose life work is bound inextricably, or so it seems to them, to coal, we are going to be moving away from that direction.
I guess we all would like to take different facets of life, if we could, and we'd take it and put it over here on a shelf and separate it from everything else. That would be nice if we could do that. Unfortunately, it's impossible. When you talk about energy availability, renewable energy, how we're going to deal with that in the future, you can't get away from the mere population of this planet, and here in the United States, our population. We have more and more people. More and more people use more and more energy, and it is inevitable, obviously, that creates more and more problems for us that we have to deal with. When you look at the oceans of the world and the supply of food that we get from the waterways, all of this comes in effect. I mean, isn't it true? We can't separate any of these, and I'm sure that as you look at that, the energy is a thread that runs through everything. Yes.
And particularly, I mean, you make a good point about the United States, and that it's true that our population is growing and is certainly consuming more energy as we become more dependent on various aspects of our lifestyle that are energy, that require a lot of energy, even computing. Where I was at a seminar the other day where, I hadn't thought this, but all of at a certain point, there are going to be 1 trillion devices connected to the Internet. 1 trillion devices. And all of this requires energy. So there's an issue there. But more going back down to earth, so to speak, what's happening outside of the United States in terms of energy consumption is far more radical than what we will be experiencing here in the United States. So the the growing middle class of the great Asian nations of India and China, and to a lesser degree, I suppose, Indonesia. There are countries all over the world that will be experiencing a renaissance in terms of, renaissance is the wrong word because there was no birth in the first place. Just, I would say, an urbanization, a development of those populations in terms of, there are going to be people, as an example, who will be driving a car for the first time. And I'm talking about hundreds of millions of people moving out of the agrarian regions into the cities, getting jobs that have to do with industrialization and the information age, who are going to be wanting to take advantage of the fruits that you and I have grown up with. In other words, the fact that we can drive, the fact that we can go out at night, and so forth and so on. So all of this is going to require an enormous increase in the consumption of energy in any of its forms. So we have to be, overall, it's going to be the real issue associated with how do we, at a global level, create energy consumption generation and consumption policies that really work in a sustainable way.
We'll let everybody know that the rain has started here in downtown Mount Sterling right now, so that system that's moving through is actually up on us. You've worked with a lot of folks. You've worked with IBM and Hewlett-Packard, and you've worked with some of the automobile manufacturers and Xerox and AT&T, and I don't see any of the oil companies on here that have enlisted your services. Did you just leave them out, or did that not happen?
Well, it didn't happen, but that's something of a coincidence, to be honest with you. My career there for 30 years as a marketing consultant to business companies, I mean, largely when you think about it, oil companies it's a consumer product. And I never learned anything about how to market, perfume or dog food or any of that stuff. So the common denominator of the companies for whom I worked is largely that they sell products or services to other businesses.
Very good. Craig, can you name who are a couple of the major companies in this country that get it in terms of renewable energy? You think who are people that are maybe stepping out in front that we could watch and know that they're doing the things that maybe should be done in order to operate their companies in a favorable way, energy-wise?
Well, it's interesting you say that, and there are two main answers to that question. One is, which companies are doing this because it's the right thing to do? And that's a hard question. I'm not a psychologist, and I'm not a mind reader, so I don't know. When I look at, for instance, Fred Smith, the CEO and chairman, I believe, of FedEx, and what he's doing in terms of sustainability and putting in electric vehicle fleets and so forth, and certainly being a very visible figure in suggesting that the United States needs an energy policy and that our dependence on oil is bad. So you would like to think that he's doing that for the right reasons. I'm the last person to ask in terms of what is the authenticity of his motive with respect to what he's doing and saying. Having said that, he's certainly on the right side of the issue as far as I'm concerned. So, Fred, Godspeed, man. And there are other companies, to take another extremely visible example, and one that's actually not too far from you folks, General Electric, clearly, and again, I'm not a fly on the wall of their board meetings. I have no insight into exactly what they're doing and why they're doing it. But from my take, this is a company that clearly wants to own the world as it goes green. They understand that the world is doing this for whatever concatenation of reasons. So here you've got people who, I think it's Louisville, have a plant, the size of All Outdoors that manufactures
Appliance Park
machines.
there, they call it.
I'm sorry?
It's called Appliance Park, is the area where they're located in Louisville.
I say, good. So it must be simply enormous. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
Okay. But anyway, so everything that's coming out of Appliance Park is smart grid ready. So in other words, it comes with an onboard computer such that your refrigerator, your washing machine can do its thing at precisely the right time, that you can access it from a remote location. You can turn it on in the middle of the night when energy availability is at its peak, where it costs the least for you and everybody else. That it interfaces with the grid in ways that are intelligent. So here's a company, and again, I do not impute, I do not claim to understand their motives, but I do. Anybody looking at this would be very foolish not to conclude that they want to own the world as it goes green. So again, more power to them.
And important to note, I think that within the last 10 days, General Motors has recorded quarterly earnings that were kind of, out the roof, went well. So obviously, from what you're telling us, here's a company that gets it energy-wise, trying to do the right things, doing a lot of the right things, and at the same time making enormous profits along with it. So that's a success story that maybe needs to be looked at more closely by other companies.
I guess so. I mean, looking at the car companies, GM in particular, and I'm thrilled with what they're doing with the Chevy Volt. It's a cool automobile. I've watched its development over the years, and I'm a friend of the guy, Tony Posawatz, whose baby this was and is. So, having said that, it's the profits associated with GM right now have little, if anything, to do with the Chevy Volt. I hope that they will over the long term, and they have, that's obviously a plug-in hybrid. It has an internal combustion engine in it to recharge the battery, plug-in hybrids are an important step on the way to full battery electrics. Tony has told me that they are researching vigorously a full battery electric. I have a feeling that they're going to be a relevant player in the constellation of auto companies forever. I'd like to think that. And if, to the degree to which that's true, they certainly need to continue to embrace electric transportation. Having said that, their profits right now, as I say, have only to do with pent-up demand. In other words, the average car on our roads right now, there are 230 million cars on our roads. The average one is 10 years old right now, and that's gone up considerably over the last few years, considering that people have been loath to make the investment in a new car, and so there's simply pent-up demand. And as I say, in addition, there is huge demand coming out of the rest of the world, Asia in particular, and a lot of GM's profits derive from that. But good point.
In the very few minutes that we have left, Craig, I have something I'd like for you to do if you could. And I know in the book, and hopefully people are going to pick this one up, and because you talk a lot about the big money and power politics and how those are incorporated with U.S. energy policy. You don't have your head in the sand in terms of this book, and realizing that all that exists at the same time, looking for solutions and ways out. That's the important part of it, is that we somehow find a way to get away from the power politics, so to speak, and get politicians and somehow get the government to embrace and start doing these things. And I think through corporate America, hopefully they will. But if you look at where we are today, can you tell us maybe something that is you feel like is the first element of really getting us in the direction of clean energy, some product, some form of energy that's right there on the cutting edge? We're about to see something really happen. Then maybe taking something else that's a little bit in the middle section of that, and then take something that may be a little bit far off, but you see futuristically that we will see that will help us, rid ourselves of unneeded dependency on energies that just don't work for this world.
Okay. Well, first of all, let me start with the way you began, and that is the issue of power politics. It is true that the oil companies employ 7,000 lobbyists. So that's, 13 for every representative and senator in Washington. This is the largest lobby on the planet. So, when I look at this thing, I simply see corruption. And I know that's a harsh word to describe anything that could happen in the great United States. But you have to think, regardless of what you think about corporate lobbying, you have to think that the oil companies have at least the common sense to understand that they must be getting something for all the money they're paying those 7,000 people. And they are. They have created a playing field that's anything but level in terms of moving forward. They've created, just as an example, as much as we bemoan the gas prices, they've created artificially inexpensive oil, which obviously hinders the capital formation required to create competitive solutions in terms of renewable energy. So until we get aggressive in asking our elected leaders to understand and behave accordingly vis-a-vis a legitimate energy policy, this is really going to happen, unfortunately, very slowly. Now, to answer your other question, if I were to talk about the forms of renewable energy, well, everybody's familiar with photovoltaics and wind. And fortunately, we're very close to the point at which we will have what's referred to as grid parity. In other words, the cost of an incremental megawatt of electricity derived from, for instance, photovoltaics, which is a couple bucks a watt right now. But in the next few years, it will be coming down to $1 a watt, at which point the cost of putting up more generation capability will be just as inexpensive with photovoltaics as it will be with coal or whatever else. At which point, even regardless of what regardless of what you think about coal or nuclear or any of this stuff, it's going to be a heck of a difficult argument, I would think, for the boardroom of Duke Energy to say, I want another coal plant where I can have that extra gigawatt of power coming from a renewable resource, one that doesn't use any fuel at all except the natural flow of photons between the sun and the earth. So I think in the next couple of years, but certainly by 2020, we will have achieved grid parity, at which point these questions will start to answer themselves. Having said that, there are better forms, as I mentioned in the first half hour, there are better forms of this, and it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. For my money, I'm a big fan of what's referred to as solar thermal. So this is, or AKA concentrated solar power, or CSP. So this is a technology by which you simply focus the sun's rays on a point or on a line and use that heat energy to turn a turbine, just like the coal, burning coal creates steam, turns a turbine, generates electricity. This does the precise same thing, but using the heat from the sun instead of the heat from burning coal. So this is a technology that, as I mentioned, is fairly new. This is under development, as they all are. I mean, certainly coal is under development because we keep coming up with better and better ways of making it cleaner and cleaner. So, and dealing with coal ash and various things. So, for my money, solar thermal is a wonderful solution in the kind of medium term, in the next, say, for the next century, for a couple of reasons. One, the cost of developing it is coming down. Number two, the issue with renewables is intermittency. The sun doesn't shine 24 hours a day and the wind doesn't blow 24 hours a day, but our power requirements are continuous. I mean, they ramp up and down, but we can't deal very well with a photovoltaic array that is the sun's beating on it 1 minute and it's clouded over the next minute. So that does create horrific issues with respect to the grid, as you can imagine. So the beauty of solar thermal is because the energy is heat as opposed to electricity, you can store heat energy a lot less expensively than you can electrical energy. Batteries, as I'm sure you're aware, are viciously expensive. So the whole issue with electric vehicles is the cost and weight, but certainly the cost of the battery packs on them. We pay, almost $1,000 a kilowatt hour for lithium-ion batteries. So to use that on a grid scale, on a utility scale, is unthinkable. So the beauty of this is you can store enormous quantities of heat such that you can deploy this at night or on rainy days or what have you.
I'm going to think that the book that you've done is really very suitable. We're coming up to a graduation time period here, and I would think that for a high school graduate, someone who's in college getting ready for the summer, this is would be a really important book for those young people to read, because you and I are moving on one of these days, and we're dealing with it, and we're going to be faced with it. But for those 20 and 25-year-olds, Craig, they're going to see a lot of changes in their lifetime with energy sources. Very important for them to kind of know what's going on.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, and thanks so much for having me on the show. This has really been fun, and I really do appreciate the opportunity.
Okay, again, the website is 2greenenergy.com. That's the numeral 2, greenenergy.com. And the book is Renewable Energy, Facts and Fantasies. Craig Shields, our guest this morning. Craig, hope to catch up with you again sometime. Maybe going to be a sunny day in Santa Barbara, I hope.
Yes, I believe so.
Oh, very good. You enjoy. Have a great day, and keep up your good work that you're doing. We'll look for that next project.
All right. Thanks so much.
Thanks.
I know.